Welcome everybody, very warm welcome to today's Teach Meet. My name's Jo, I work here at Twinkl in Phonics team, and I'm joined by Simon and some of my other colleagues from Twinkl Phonics team here at Twinkl. We created the Twinkl Phonics SSP, and today we're going to talk to you a little bit about the impact of phonics on the Key Stage 2 classroom. So the first thing I'll do is give a bit of an overview on the bigger picture and the need for phonics in Key Stage 2, what the reading framework has to say about catching up older learners who aren't yet fluent readers, and the impact of taking timely action and the impact of not taking timely action to narrow the gap, to put the need for Key Stage 2 phonics in context. I'll then hand over to Simon, who will take us through getting started with Key Stage 2 phonics in your setting and the challenges that many schools face in terms of staff knowledge, timetabling, reading avoidant behaviours in learners, and the solutions that Twinkl have been working on to try to make things a bit smoother for you and your learners here. He's also going to talk about our intervention programme that's been crafted specially for Key Stage 2, which is called the Decoders. So what you can expect in terms of the structure of the programme, delivering the daily sessions, assessment, resources. So a lot about the intervention programme that we have here at Twinkl to support learners at Key Stage 3 with phonics. I'll then jump back in and take you a little bit through the new Key Stage 2 Rhino Readers Decoders reading books that we're releasing to sit alongside this programme to help embed those reading and phonics skills that the Twinkl Phonics programme teaches for Key Stage 2, but hopefully in a way that will be a refreshing change to any learners and educators who've had to struggle along with materials for a much younger audience before now. And finally, we'll make sure we have some time to show you where to find everything you need on the Twinkl website. We're aware it can be a bit of a minefield sometimes to navigate, not always the easiest to find in terms of search, and before returning to address any questions that you have today. So that's the plan. Let's crack on and get started. So why the big interest in settings looking to reinforce and revisit phonics in Key Stage 2 at the moment? Well, systematic synthetic phonics as a pedagogy has been pretty much embedded into primary schools in England now with the release of the guidance in the reading framework, and it is the Ofsted approach that they're looking to see schools take. And for many schools, that will mean using a validated SSP to deliver the phonics teaching at EYFS in Key Stage 1. And for a lot of settings, using that phonics first approach has highlighted the effectiveness of this way of teaching reading for the majority of students. And the research is now pretty conclusive as to the fact that for the vast majority of children, phonics is the best way to learn to read. But however, of course, that doesn't mean that the skills needed will be secure for all children at the end of Key Stage 1. There will be many children who aren't fluent enough at the end of Key Stage 1 to move smoothly into that much more reading focused curriculum that you have in Key Stage 2. It's a curriculum that relies on quickly absorbing and digesting written content. And of course, there are lots of reasons why this gap emerges. COVID was a big reason, and phonics learning was missed, and it couldn't always be delivered with the rigour it needed during lockdowns. I personally would also posit there's been a shift towards video content over written content for children, a bit of a cultural shift in what they choose to pick up and entertain themselves with nowadays. So inevitably, books for a lot of children become more of a foreign country. And of course, there are children who have difficulties with the nuts and bolts of associating visual shapes with sounds, whether that's dyslexia, visual distress, or speech and language issues, or other barriers to learning. But for all children who aren't confident with the phonics they need to read fluently at the end of Key Stage 1, unless action's taken, they will face a growing gap between themselves and their peers in terms of accessing and keeping up with the Key Stage 2 curriculum. And this is what the updated reading framework makes clear, that learning in the wider curriculum depends increasingly on literacy. Pupils who cannot read well enough do not have full access to the curriculum, and the word rich will get richer and the word poor get poorer. And I think we're all aware of the vicious circle which then develops as these children become more aware of their difficulties and the barriers they're facing. There can be reading avoidant behaviours such as slowness or reluctance to complete tasks, reliance on peers to relay information in a spoken rather than a written form. And there'll also be crucial gaps in understanding of what they learn. And as they try to catch up and digest and keep up with what they're being given, the lesson moves on and they'll miss the next bit. And that growing gap has an impact on behaviour for learning and well-being too. For some children, that will present as anxiety, withdrawal. For others, poor behaviour. And the patterns tend to become entrenched unless we step in and do something. And in terms of the long-term impact, it's not just about accessing the Key Stage 2 curriculum. The research that's been done suggests that if you're not fluent in reading at primary school, there are significant long-term negative consequences in life later on. And PISA have done some work around this, and their long-term studies indicate that good reading skills are actually a better predictor of success than socioeconomic status. So being a skilled reader can actually be a way of improving your life chances. Interestingly, there's also an association being made between reading and heightened levels of well-being. And that was a post-pandemic study by Bettini et al. In 2022. And also, there's a role that reading has to do with broadening experiences for children and enabling them to appreciate perspectives and develop empathy, and they're more socially conscious. And perhaps the more you read, the more you see past your own four walls. It's a bit of a window into the world. So it tends to be that if you're reading, you enjoy reading, you tend to do more of it, you are better at recognizing a range of perspectives, you learn more about all sorts of things, you expand your vocabulary. And of course, if for those whom reading is difficult, the opposite is true. They all fall behind, not just in their reading, but all subjects. A vicious circle then develops. And I think reading has a smaller slice of children's appreciation than perhaps it has had in the past. There's a little bit of a sad statistic from the National Literacy Trust here in 2022 that reading enjoyment in older children and teens were actually at its lowest since 2005. And this was a general sample of all children, but I would suspect that amongst children who find reading a challenge, this will be an even more marked drop. So in summary, reading fluently is so important in terms of outcomes for children, from both an academic and from a well-being and life chances perspective too. So in a nutshell, that's why it's so important that we take action to catch up less fluent readers and give them this vital skill. Now at this point, I was going to think about what do older learners need to become successful readers? And I have had some thoughts on this, but as you're such a chatty lot tonight, it'd be nice to hear from you in the chat about what you think the older learners might need more of or differently to become successful readers. What do you think the magic ingredients are that we need to give these children so that they can close that gap and make that progress? And there is a few things I've wondered about. I've thought, with the children that I've taught, I think to become a successful reader, when you've had a lot of experience of not being a successful reader, I think the key thing is to have enough experiences of getting it right. You want to shift that narrative in your head that you're not so great a reader. You need, in order to shift that narrative, you need a lot of small successful steps that are going to make you change your thinking. And they need to be steps that you take. I mean, not simply repeating or overlearning using materials used before. You do need to have the same phonics skills and the same GPCs that younger children have, but they're going to need to be presented in a way that you take to and that you can do. So it's not things that are going to make you feel younger, not things that are going to belittle you, highlight the gap, or feel like take two of what you've already done. And we have got some ideas in the chat too about a wide range of vocab, and that's definitely true. And obviously the more that you read, the more you'll experience that and you'll have experience of that. So in terms of what I think we need to look for in key ingredients in any kind of intervention for older children, I think one thing is it founded on good assessment? Does it allow you to jump on and jump off where you need to? Some children will going to need most or all of the phonics recapping, but others are just going to need sections of it and they won't necessarily need the whole thing. So assessment needs to clearly highlight gaps that need covering, and it needs to allow for frequent check-ins so you can adjust the pace and deliver what the children need. I think it's going to need some targeted teaching to make sure the planning it for any assessment or any intervention is going to need to be thorough enough to be used by any adult running the intervention. It's going to need to cover spelling as well as reading. Phonics straddles both, but obviously not all reading interventions do, because if they can't read it, they aren't likely to be able to spell it. So targeted teaching is going to be really important. Yes, indeed, scaffolding to support working memory too. That's a really key thing. That's something that some learners really struggle with their working memory and being able to hold enough in that memory for the intervention to make sense. Really crucially here, I think the resources and books that you're going to use with these learners need to feel age appropriate. They can't feel too young. We don't want situations where children are going to be embarrassed about taking out any books or resources in front of their peers. So any materials that we use with these learners need to be targeted at their age group. They can't feel young. And a really important thing about an intervention is that it needs to happen enough for success to occur. So ideally daily. I know interventions are often difficult to staff, but really interventions, if they're going to work for older learners, need to happen regularly enough for that learning to properly embed. And I guess they need to offer a lot of opportunities for fluency. So you've got the content that you're covering and you're applying, you're getting the phonics through to the children, but you need them to be fluent with reading material that's going to be engaging and pitched at where they're at with the intervention. If you're using books with content they haven't been taught yet, which is often the case if you're using books for older learners, that will work against those little successful steps you want them to experience. You want them to be able to link the content they're taught in a phonics intervention with what they're reading. So there's lots of things that we're going to need if we're going to have a successful intervention with those older learners. I think at this point, I'm going to hand over to Simon, and Simon's going to talk us through a little bit about what phonics could look like in Key Stage 2 if all those ingredients were put into place. So over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah. In my role at Twinkl, I'm educational content lead for the phonics team. So my team spends a lot of time creating resources for teaching phonics in schools. And generally our focus is on Key Stage 1 and early years practitioners. And so in order to kind of prepare for today's meeting, we had a little think about what are the key differences between what phonics looks like for Key Stage 2 compared to what we're used to seeing with phonics lessons and resources for Key Stage 1 and early years. So the kind of key differences that you might come across is that in early years in Key Stage 1, you've got daily phonics lessons planned in, and there's a requirement to teach phonics for an hour a day in early years in Key Stage 1, and that sort of time isn't given to Key Stage 2 children. So once they make it into Year 3, Year 4, that amount of time just isn't there on the timetable for teaching phonics. You also have you'll find that all staff will be trained, including teaching assistants, LSAs. It's not unusual in an infant school or Key Stage 1 setting to have 7 or 8 different adults taking different groups of children, delivering phonics constantly, multiple groups all the time. So that staff's going to be really, really well trained up. It's going to be second nature to have all of your staff trained in teaching of phonics. Much less likely to find that in Key Stage 2. Typically, teachers are not going to be familiar with phonics teaching if they've not taught in a Key Stage 1 or early years setting before. So there is that possibility that you've got a subject knowledge gap with staffing at Key Stage 2. In Key Stage 1, there's obviously the statutory phonics screening check in the summer term. And there's nothing like a statutory assessment to kind of like persuade your business manager to open their wallet and kind of invest in materials and to invest in training for staff. In Key Stage 2, the focus has shifted entirely onto those Key Stage 2 assessments. There's a much broader focus and you're less likely to have the time and resources to spend on getting children ready in phonics because it's assumed that that will be in place beforehand. And the other thing that I really thought was important is that it's just second nature in a Key Stage 1 classroom and an early years classroom that children are exposed to frequent daily reminders continuously. Their continuous provision is always set up around supporting children with that learning. That's just what Key Stage 1 and early years settings look like. You've got your mnemonics on the wall, you've got various visual reminders, sound mats come out constantly during the teaching, your buntings up around the wall, you've got children lining up in line and the teachers bam, bam, bam with their flashcards. Those sorts of things come straight away. They're always present in those classrooms in Year 1. Whereas in Key Stage 2, it's far less likely that the classroom's going to be set up for a phonics-rich, literacy-rich environment that's based on those early literacy skills. So children are more likely to be self-conscious about those literacy skills. If you're in Year 3, in Year 4, Year 5, it's less likely that you're going to want to have things like mnemonics on the wall of your classroom, teachers showing flashcards constantly. It's assumed that children are going to be beyond that. They're going to be self-conscious about those gaps in their skills. So creating an environment where children can really pick those skills up is much, much harder for you. And you've got to plan for it much more deliberately than the way that you would in Key Stage 1. So we want to talk just a little bit about how we can actually help. So within my team in Twinkl Phonics, we've obviously created a DFE validated SSP, a systematic synthetic phonics program. So our program starts by teaching the letters and sounds, and then in a progression where they can build on the letters and sound knowledge that they can start to learn, read and spell words of increasing complexity. So that's how a progressive SSP program works. Our program is DFE validated. We're used by hundreds of schools in the UK, lots more internationally as well. So the first thing that we obviously say is that we have a phonics program. We have this expertise in the building. We also offer bespoke training to enable schools to really skill up in teaching phonics, but also teaching our program, but also generally in teaching phonics. We teach those really fundamental phonics skills as part of our training program as well. We've also got a huge collection of accompanying decodable reading books, our Rhino Readers scheme. So we have those books for practicing and consolidating the skills after the phonics has been taught. And so the same teachers, the same team that we have here at Twinkl has created a program called Decoders, which is a complete Key Stage 2 intervention program to help bring phonics teaching into the Key Stage 2 classroom. So we're going to have a quick look at what we have to offer in Decoders. So Decoders is our complete Key Stage 2 phonics intervention program. We've included we create complete planning for levels 2 to 6 of our SSP program. So level 2 is the first stage where children start to learn letters and sounds and the correspondence of those letters and sounds. So from level 2 right through level 6 is included in our Decoders program as well. We've created daily scripted lessons and all the resources to accompany those, so staff feel confident to deliver sessions, whatever their teaching background. We know that there's not necessarily going to be time for lots and lots of training, lots and lots of prep for teachers in a Key Stage 2 classroom. So we wanted those to be really easy to pick up, really accessible. We know it might not always be the classroom teacher. It might often be TAs and extra support adults. So we wanted those resources to be really pick up and use. We've created, our Rhino Readers team's created accompanying decodable reading books, which Joe's going to tell you all about shortly. We've aimed those at Key Stage 2 specifically to practice and consolidate those phonics skills. And we decided to lean into what we kind of decided on a SPY theme as something that would kind of hopefully engage and motivate children we don't want it to feel like they're going through their phonics program all over again. We know that if they've done Twinkl Phonics, then they've met Kit and Sam and they've spent time with their family. But that's really aimed at a Key Stage 1 type child or an early years child. We wanted to make something that Key Stage 2 children would feel at home and feel interested and excited to go and spend time with. If they're doing this every day, they don't want it to feel like the same old thing again. So we created our SPY type theme, and we'll have a little look at what that looks like more in some of the resources. So where you would begin, so there are kind of two ways that decoders could be used with Key Stage 2. You might use it particularly to address individual gaps in children's phonic knowledge. So often you'll have children that come into year 3, perhaps year 4, might come new to your school, that you realize have gaps in their phonics. Certain parts of that program, the progression have been missed, not learned properly, not consolidated. So it might be addressing individual gaps. You also might have children who have come in and have complete gaps. They may not have even made it onto the later stages, the later phases of phonics, just because they were struggling in the early stages, and they needed to kind of put those in place at their pace. So you might need to recap complete levels or phases for certain children. You might also have children that have come from other parts of the world with different first languages. Phonics is not always the best approach, but there may be that you have certain children that you want to start them from square one with complete levels of phonics. So either way, our suggestion is that you start with assessment. Obviously, a really, really important part is knowing where your children are coming to you from. So that can start by liaising with their Key Stage 1 teachers, talking to the staff that work with those children. if they've been in this country in year 1, they'll have data from their phonics screening check. And so all of that might be useful for building up the picture of where the child is coming to you from. But we've also created a assessment pack for the whole scheme. So this provides you with a really nice kind of touch view at where that child is at. It goes through each of the levels kind of progressively so that you kind of build up a plan of what that child or group of children needs from their phonics intervention. And from there, it's worth spending some time as a staff collaboratively deciding how you're going to group and timetable your sessions. You may not have, probably don't have time if you've got 7 or 8 children in a class that need different interventions. It's quite unlikely that you'll have time to give each of those 7 children a one-to-one intervention that caters to their needs. So it might be that you can put a group of 3 onto level 2, a group of 3 onto level 5, and address the needs that roughly those children are at. So spend some time strategizing to be able to make sure you can find the time and find the space and the allocation to get those children into some interventions. So the how, the where, the when, and the how is the next kind of thing to think about. So we've created some really robust subject leader guidance. This is a good idea to get your have a look at with your English or literacy lead in your setting. Gives you an overview on how to deliver phonics interventions. It provides links to all of those assessment resources to help you kind of get set up and plan for how your interventions are going to look. And then for each of the levels, there's an overview document that breaks down exactly what's taught in each week of each level of the program, so you can start to plan where those see where those gaps are and plan where those children need to be in terms of each of their phonics levels. So from there, it's worth taking some time to prepare. With phonics, you're going to find that a lot of programs, including ours, have a lot of resources. Children need to see flashcards, which have got the letter shapes and mnemonics to help them remember. Sound mats are a really, really powerful tool for helping them, especially in their independent writing. So all of those resources take a little bit of time to prepare. We do offer some of those to purchase as well. But if you're using our program, you can download everything from site, print, prepare, and get it all set up in advance so the children are coming to you ready to work. We also created logbooks so that the children can record and the teacher can record the progress as that child works through each of their lessons. And we've got a number of practice activity resources as well. So taking a bit of time to get yourself ready and get all those resources prepped and set up. And then our daily lesson plans can be downloaded and printed one by one for the lessons that you need. You can download a full week at a time, and it is a good idea to prep those ahead, get everything ready. We've trained in some schools where we've talked about having a box ready so that phonics box can kind of move around with the children or move with the adult, and you've got everything set up so that once you've done one set of prep, that can then last you the whole year if everybody's taking care of it and sharing those resources out. So get that done plenty of time in advance to give you maximum time in your sessions. So yeah, a whole range of support and resources, loads to be found. So the lessons themselves, I'm just going to walk very quickly through what one of those sessions would look like. So our lessons are completely scripted. They're daily lessons and they are ready to download, print and teach the same day. So you'll find at the top of each session the learning objectives and terminology really nice and clear at the top. So you can make sure that you're working on the level you expect to be. You know what the children, you know what their outcomes are for that particular session. We've listed everything in a resources kind of section as well, so you can make sure you've got all your resources ready for the session. It might look a lot, but we've packaged it all up into a supporting resources pack. There's a hyperlink. Anything that's in blue is a Twinkl resource. Anything that's black is kind of a classroom resource that you would generally find, things like whiteboards and pencils. But yeah, you can hit anything that's underlined in blue is a hyperlink. It will take you straight to where it is on site. You can download and then you've got everything that you need listed there in front of you. So obviously, if you've done that prep beforehand, it would just be a case of making sure you've got everything in the box ready for that day. So then within the lesson itself, we have a five-part lesson plan. It's the same as in throughout all of our phonics lessons from early years all the way through to the Key Stage 2 intervention, which includes revisit and review, teach, practice, apply, and then assess. So your decoders lessons are have the same exact structure, so it helps for the children and the teachers to kind of get used to that structure. It'll become sort of predictable and help you to get into a groove, help you to get into a rhythm with those children as you know what's kind of coming each time. We've laid it out so the instructions are really nice and clear. So what to say is on the left, what to do is on the right, so you can literally pick up the script and go with it. If you are really pushed for time that day, you've printed out your resources, everything you need is right in front of you. You shouldn't need to do anything else. So then the first section that you'll do is a revisit and review, so that you look through prior learning. Generally, you would do that with flashcards. The children would review the sounds that they've learned, read some of the words that they should be able to read at that point. We then have a teach section where they'll learn a new grapheme phoneme correspondence, a new GPC, or a tricky word in every session, so that there's that coverage throughout. They're always taught one new thing each day. We've put a little times on there to help you kind of keep your session to time. They're roughly 20-minute sessions, and they give you a little reminder to help you kind of keep to time, to kind of emphasize which parts are really pacey and which parts you need to spend a bit more time with the children to kind of help get that the lesson, the structure that you need. And then for the practice element of the session, there's various engaging games and activities. They're kind of different for each day. They'll start to recognize some of them that come around things like your bingos and spot the words, or recognize the mnemonics and things. So yeah, lots of different practice activities to practice those sounds as you learn them. And then you move on to the latter part of the lesson. You have an apply section in every lesson. So those gives you opportunities to apply the children's learning in some sort of context. So they might be writing words that you read to them. They're listening out for words in a sentence. There's an activity where they write down the words that you read out, and then they have to count through and find the right letters. They put those into a secret code, and it kind of leads into the spy theme, where that is their code word for that lesson, to kind of help give them some motivation to be able to get that activity right at the end of the lesson. There's always an assessment grid provided at the bottom, so that you can record against the learning objectives, help you kind of like reflect on the learning that you've done and remind you of what those objectives were. Good to include the children in that as well, especially at that age. That's something they can engage with. And then they have a logbook, which I showed you the download. I think I've got one right here as well. So the logbook gives the child something that they can physically keep a track of all their learning, and that gives you evidence as well of everything that they've been doing in those lessons. It gives them various things that they could use as well in their independent learning. There's a sound mat in the back of it and a word list, so they can take those into their lessons with them and use them to help support with their learning. So that's what the lesson itself looks like. Once you've kind of gone through those sessions, each session, you're then going to want to look at ways to apply that learning. So as with any teaching, consolidation and practice are really, really key to ensuring that the learning is embedded and can be applied in context. So one more thing we snipped from the reading framework, really important to keep considering. Children should be reading books matched closely to their phonic knowledge, practicing handwriting and spelling, and writing sentences from dictation. So the level that they are with their phonics needs to be matched really closely to the books that you're giving them to read and practice and consolidate. That's really, really important. So in order to help support that, we've created these resources. So we've created the logbooks, which record some of their writing in it. We've also just recently created and released these new fantastic comprehension resources. So I'm going to give those a bit of a plug today. So there are comprehension resources where they can read a short passage and then answer some questions about the text to really help practice and embed the comprehension skills that go along with their decoding. And then we, of course, have our fantastic Decoders books. So I'm going to pass back over to Jo, and she's going to talk to you in some more detail about the Decoders books. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, so as Simon mentions, it's really important that you have matched texts that are really going to help engage your learners and get them excited about reading. But key to that is that they need to reinforce the skills that they've been taught. So the same team that wrote the decodable books for the Twinkl Phonics SSP, the Rhino Readers team, have written books called Rhino Readers Decoders for Key Stage 2 with the same key principles at its heart, really, really careful alignment to the phonics teaching. And this time, instead of there being chunks of books that the children can access, we've matched the learning even more closely than that. And with these books, there is a book per week of the intervention, and that reflects the fast pace of it, but also the need to embed that learning really quickly. So the full scheme is going to have 36 books, and currently there are 12 ebooks available at level 5. We'll be rolling more out over the year. looking to make these available to print as a pack for you to buy in autumn 2025. So they're on their way, and the first ones are out as ebooks right now. The main thing that we have really focused on is making these books engage over learners. We've got inclusivity and diversity at our heart when we've made them as well. There's a range of new characters and storylines, a very different feel to the Kit and Sam world of Key Stage 1. These books are particularly aimed at Key Stage 2 children. I'll be able to show you a little bit more about that in a minute. But another thing to mention in terms of being able to access the books is that they've been carefully designed to suit the needs of older, reluctant readers. There's a choice of font that you can read them in, so they can read them in either the Twinkl font or an open dyslexic font, because we know that not one font suits everyone. There's tinted pages to make the letters really clear, and we've got letter spacing in the books that's slightly different to the main scheme. This letter spacing follows the British Dyslexia Association's guidelines in terms of it being maximum accessibility for readers with dyslexia and visual distress. And the reading load in the book keeps pace with their growing ability and fluency. So we've been really careful to match the amount of reading that children have to do with the level that they're reading. And of course, the most important thing is that the readers enjoy the books. We've taken a lot of trouble to try to make these books a little bit more than just phonics readers. We hope they're engaging and absorbing books that children wouldn't be seen embarrassed to be reading alongside their peers. And our informal test within the team is they've got to look good enough to pick off a library shelf and read, not like the schemes where the cover and design sort of shouts phonics practice. We want to make them really, really fun. And we've thought really carefully about the range of genres and text types that we offer, with biographies, play scripts, comics, and we've got adventure books in development as well. So there's quite a big range there for you to share with your learners. And on the next slide, I've put a bit more of a close-up with the books that we have available just now. And these books take children through the level 5 teaching weeks. And so those are the weeks where the children learn another set of alternative spellings for the vowel sounds that they know and pronunciations for the vowel sounds that they know. As you can see, there's a nice range of fiction. We've got real life there, and we've got some fantasy. We've got comic novels as well, and we've got some non-fiction, such as we've got How to Have a Year of Fun and Do Animals Have Superpowers there. And we've got a really big twist on a traditional tale and a diary-based novel too. So there's a nice range of genres for children to explore. And of course, all the text is fully decodable and matched to that week of the intervention. We've also ideated on a new character set for these books because we really wanted to build on the strength of the story-based scheme that we have for Key Stage 1 and EOIFS with Kit and Sam at its heart. Having characters recur through a scheme has been something we've had feedback on, has been very well received in the main scheme for EOIFS and Key Stage 1. But we were mindful of the pitfalls of including older Kit and Sam in the stories. We weren't sure if that would completely work in terms of giving children fresh material to engage with when we're talking about a whole reading book. So out of those conversations, we've developed our new character set, and there's a little picture of them there. We've got Min, Kat, Anne, and Dom, and these our characters are going to have a starring role in the Decoders books. And those characters have let us grow up the settings and plots for our books, and they've also allowed us to be a bit more representative and diverse in the variety of characters that we show. So you'll see them at home, at school, in a residential camp, and in lots of other places too across the whole scheme. They form a key part of our fiction offering, not the only part, because we know children want to read a wide variety of books, and not every child is going to want to follow the adventures of a gang across the books, but it is a key part of the scheme because we're building on the success of what we've learned with Kit and Sam in EOIFS and Key Stage 1. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is how we prepare the children for reading in the books. Obviously, these books follow quite closely on the phonics intervention that Simon's described, but often it's really useful to be able to just rehearse those key GPCs, those grapheme phoneme correspondences that are so important at the beginning of the book so that they're really fresh in children's minds when they read. So this is what we include in all of our books. It's called a before reading page. Compared to other books that you see on the market, it's very colourful and bright, and it engages children. It definitely feels like something for them rather than being hidden away on the inside of the front cover. But it's a little bit more grown up than the page that we have in our books for EOIFS and Key Stage 1. So it's got a little bit more of an adult design, a more mature design there. It's got the specific learning of the week pulled out there at the bottom, and there's also the opportunity for children to blend those sounds that they've learned into key focus vocabulary. So anything unfamiliar or maybe a little bit trickier than normal can be rehearsed and discussed before they go on to meet it in the book. And similarly to the other Rhino Readers books we've written, we've highlighted any exception or common exception words we've used in the story that can't be fully decoded at this point, but we've put them in a more grown-up blue rather than our tricky pink that we have in the main scheme. So this whole page really builds on the success that we've had the before reading page in the existing Rhino Readers books for younger children, but with a more mature feel for overlearners. We feel it's a good ingredient for a book, but it just needed to be a little bit more grown up for this age group. And the other thing I wanted to explain is how we've made these books as accessible as possible for readers with dyslexia and other visual difficulties. I mentioned this a little bit in the introduction. All our books meet, and most of them exceed, the requirements of the British Dyslexia Association in terms of spacing, page tint and font size. So that's spacing between the letters and between the lines. And we've also been mindful of how very large text that's used in the EYFS books could come across to older readers. So we've offered the books in a kind of a size of font that looks a little bit more grown up, but is still more than accessible enough for readers with visual distress and dyslexia. And we also offer our ebooks in 2 alternative fonts. They're exactly the same book, exactly the same content, but they both model the printed letter formation well and a sans serif, so that helps with visual distress. We've got Twinkl on the left, that's our font that we've designed, custom designed, and in-house, and we've also got an open dyslexic font on the right, so you can choose the ebook that best suits your learners' needs as you move through the scheme. So after having a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of the books and the intervention, I thought it might be useful to just walk you through whereabouts on the Twinkl site you can find all of these resources. And I know that sometimes it can be tricky when you're navigating Twinkl to get to the bit of Twinkl that you need. So there's 2 things I've put down here that are going to be hopefully really useful if you're going to explore this further. The top URL there where it says www.twinkl.co.uk/phonics will take you to what we call our phonics landing page, and I will show you that in a minute. But just to note that when you are typing into the search bar in Twinkl, you get this, if you start typing the word phonics, you get this really colourful, jazzy little word that says phonics there. And if you click on that, it will take you directly to the phonics landing page. So what I'll do, if I can just quickly share a different screen, I can show you it in action. So yeah, I've begun typing in phonics, and then if I click it, you'll come to our phonics landing page, which has got an awful lot of information around here about what you can find with Twinkl Phonics. But when you're looking for specifically Key Stage 2 interventions, what you'll need to do is scroll yourself down to the supporting resources section. And if you look here on the filter system on the left, there's a little button there which says Key Stage 2 Decoders. And when you click that, it will filter so that you're just seeing the decoders resources for each level. Excuse me. So across the top, there's various levels of Twinkl Phonics. So you can click on the Key Stage 2 each time, and you'll just see the resources that are available for Key Stage 2. So that's a handy thing to know if you're struggling to find any of those resources on Twinkl. That landing page is a good one to bookmark, and then you can get back and find your phonics resources in that way. Simon, I didn't know if there's anything else that you wanted to mention about the Twinkl Phonics landing page while we're on it.
You've covered that really well, Joe. Yeah, same thing as you. We suggest to all teachers when we're in training that they start by going to twinkl.co.uk/phonics and bookmark it, so that then everything you need is there, organised into the levels right there. So yeah, same thing that you said there. There was a question as well about not finding it in the search bar. Yeah, so again, it's a good idea to try and bookmark the link when you find it. If you just put into the search bar Twinkl Phonics, it should. I know some people's search behaves differently, but when you start to see the phonics logo with the sound buttons underneath, that's the one to click.
The other URL that I was going to mention quickly, if you are interested in finding the books to accompany the scheme, is the one at the bottom, which is twinkl.co.uk/reading scheme. So for that one, I will just quickly show you what that looks like when you get to it. So this is the main landing page for all of Twinkl's reading schemes. The Rhino Readers cover most of the reading schemes that Twinkl offer. So to find the books for that, you can go down and you can see the different levels of books available here. And once you've clicked on a level of book, I'm going to choose level 5 because that's where the decoders currently are at the moment. Then you'll see at the left here, there's a little tree with lots and lots of options. One of those options there is decoders. And if you click on that, you'll get yourself to the Rhino Readers Decoders page. And there you'll be able to see all of the books that we have, including a little free taster pack here. So if you haven't got a full Twinkl subscription, not to worry, you can have a little look and see some examples of the resources that Simon was talking about, and one of our books as a PDF in that link there. So there's a taster pack there available, and the rest of the books here, and a resource pack there that we've just started to bring out for some of our books and resources there. So those two, I'll just return to that screen so that you can see what they were. Those two are really key URLs within Twinkl that it's good to know about if you're interested in exploring the phonics and the reading scheme.